here that have any interest. All the folks at Terrapin Hills ought to be here. Just a statement about what we're here about today. Today's work session has been called to address what appears to be a developing crisis surrounding the Terrapin Hills sewer system in northern Fort Payne. Before we begin, it should be made clear that the city of Fort Payne had absolutely no connection with the development, installation, operation, permitting, or overseeing of the Terrapin Hills sewer system. There is no connection with the city of Fort Payne other than that the city at one time had issued a franchise to the owners to enable them to charge for their services. The franchise was conditioned on, among other things, the owner's compliance with ADM regulations and having a valid ADM permit. When ADM revoked the permit, the city correspondingly revoked the franchise. The city has now learned that there is a request from ADM for an injunction prohibiting the operation of the Terrapin Hills sewer system. Based on information we've been able to obtain, the sewer system is working properly at this point in time. ADM's request for injunction and corresponding threat to cap the outflow pipe of the system is based solely on the inability of the owner to pay and receive a permit from ADM. ADM's taking this action in spite of the fact that they have never previously requested an injunction on occasions when the system was not functioning properly and was discharging waste into Wills Creek. It would appear ironic that the pollution was allowed to continue, but failure to pay ADM brings about a request for an injunction. Should ADM obtain an injunction and carry through with its threat to cap the overflow pipe from Terrapin Hills, that would render in excess of 190 homes in at least 3 subdivisions in North Fort Payne uninhabitable, unmarketable, and worthless. ADM has sought over the past several years to pressure the city into assuming this problem that was created on ADM's watch. The city was requested to reissue a franchise in spite of the fact that ADM would not issue a permit. On advice of council, the city did not take that action, which would have resulted in exposure to liability for the city. However, the city's not ignored the situation. There have been ongoing discussions with how to address the situation going back at least as far as the 1990s. And within the last 30 days, the first step toward being able to meet this looming crisis was taken by the council when they passed the 1% sales tax, which would enable the city to issue bonds that would be necessary for the city to begin a sewer project which would solve not only Terrapin Hills situation, but would vastly improve and open up all of the northern Fort Payne area. The city is committed to, and if cooperation can be attained from ADM, trying to resolve this problem. However, it will take time, and the public should recognize that this problem was not a problem created or contributed to by the city. I've given a copy of that statement to the press, and I would just say that what we're here to talk about is what solutions we have, and if anything can be done in the short term. We know some things can be done in the long term, but just talk about where we are and what, if any, options the city has, and we'll go from that point.
I talked with ADM yesterday, Carrie Blanton, who is an assistant attorney general, I think her title is with ADM. And Wade and I talked a couple of weeks ago. He happened to be at the courthouse when they had Mr. Grove drug into court for a hearing, I suppose you would call it. And Wade just happened to be there and saw what was going on. He came and got this map and maybe the others and showed them what hopefully our plans are in the future. And they at that time requested this work session to come and, hear our plans and hear any responding comments from them. Well, then I start getting emails from Ms. Blanton wanting to know what the agenda is, who the participants are, and I said, you're it. I mean, that's the purpose of the work session, is for ADM to be here. And the response I got from them was until there is something concrete from y'all, some consensus that you're willing to go forward and be, take it over, if you want to word it that way, they said there's no reason for them to go forward. They want some reasonable time frame, not a long term. And I asked what their definition of a long term versus short term time frame, and she said, well, long term, we're not going to wait 10 years. And I said, no, this bunch is not going to drag out 10 years. We're going to do something before that. Anyway, after learning they wouldn't be here, I pondered it, and I said, well, we'll go ahead and have this meeting just to make sure all of y'all, and my words to her was pointed in the same general compass direction. I mean, if some of you want to do something and some of you don't, ADM just needs to be notified, hey, we're out of it. You do what you got to do. So,
Before we get into it in real detail, I've asked Nick Jones to come. I think everybody's aware that Nick actually purchased this property at a tax sale, although it hasn't been, whatever you call it from a legal standpoint. And he has been looking into the possibility of several different possibilities. Can you give us a brief summary of where you stand now?
Sure, yeah, I don't really have an update as far as, the profitability of it operating as an independent system. I mean, it's kind of been a long, drawn-out process. My personal opinion is that, the best thing for everybody involved is the city to take it. I understand that's a complicated situation, but you're going to be looking at the prospect of, if a private company comes in, this is purely my opinion, but if a private company comes in, you're going to see rate hikes. And I think for your citizens, it's not going to be a preferable situation because their neighbors just up the road are going to have city rates. And for the system to operate profitably for a private company, and that's their goal anyway, they're going to have to raise those rates. You're correct. I mean, my involvement's been really an accidental purchase at the tax sale. And of course, we got drug into court when Mr. Grote got drug into court, and so we've been connected that way. I talked with Mr. Grote, happy to negotiate something there if we can help. But I don't really have an answer. I just like everybody else in the room, I feel like doesn't really have an answer. But that's my side.
The last company that you were talking to, was there any progress made with them?
There's some, they're real hesitant, obviously, until they can get their people on the ground and make an assessment, of the cost that's going to be attributed to the compliance with the regs, right? I mean, they've got a lot more to lose than Mr. Grote. Conversation with Mr. Grote was that if you need help moving this thing, I'm happy to help doing that. He's been mostly responsive, but I hadn't talked to him in the last few months.
Well, being a private company is probably just like yourself and like the city of Fort Payne.
Sure.
We have to be very cautious because I can promise you ADM is just looking for somebody that they can find. And that's exactly what they would do, in my opinion.
Sure, yeah, and I tell you, I know y'all got a lot to consider, and you got to do all your due diligence.
Well,
For a private company, it's got to be profitable for them to get involved, obviously.
Got to try to protect the city and also all the other people in the city that's not on the Terrapin.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
This property that you got, is it the lagoon itself, or?
Well, there's a couple, that's a good question. It's actually the lagoon, but there's further, I've had an attorney out of Birmingham that we've been working with, and of course I've given Mr. Groves some updates on that, but the complications we run into is there's still question, and I think they're in the midst of a title search right now, but there's still question about legal easements to lines.
Right.
That's a concern for the private company coming in, right? So they have to have access to those lines to do maintenance, if they want to expand, various things. And so that's a further impediment as far, and it's an impediment also to what the systems actually work.
Right.
Well, I can enlighten a little bit. There was actually a committee formed in the 90s to look at the city taking this over. And what ultimately prevented it from being taken over at that time by the city was the fact that there are no easements that are completely discernible. There are some general easements on some of the lots. They're not specific as to this particular line. The lines run through the golf course. There's not any descriptions of exactly where they go. So as far as recorded easements, there are not. And that's one of the difficulties of taking it over. And as Red alluded to, the big concern is if you went up there and took it over today, you would immediately be out of compliance with ADM.
Sure.
And whether or not, we've never had any response. I think the query has been posed, are you going to give us some period of time to get all the ducks in a row if we have to go up there and do something with it? And I don't know that we've ever had an answer to that question. I could foresee we take it over on Monday and on Tuesday we get a letter from ADM.
Yeah.
So
You did get some concessions from ADM.
ADM called and went to Montgomery and had a sit-down meeting. I think Ms. Blanchard was in that meeting there. They indicated that they would make quite a few concessions, but, I took that as they would make concessions to a private entity, a city government. I'm not so sure that
well,
they'd make the same.
for the information with the paper, and I have not done the title work again. We did it several years ago, but there are also some judgments
Sure.
that attach to that property.
Absolutely.
So getting clear title to the lagoon may be a particularly difficult problem. And then at least in one instance, there's an assignment of all revenues produced to satisfy that judgment. So there are a ton of complications, even if you make a decision that we just want to go in and take it over. It's not going to be an easy process.
Sure. And then that's, like I said, that's a further complication. I mean, I think there's an LLC that holds that judgment. I touched base with those folks. They're open to some type of negotiation. Again, you get back to the point of, is it profitable for a private company to come in and take it? I mean, and if it's not, it's a dead end road. But let me be clear. I didn't come today to try to pressure y'all. I mean, I've sat there in a similar seat that you're sitting in. I didn't come to pressure you into making a decision one way or the other. I come to tell you where I'm standing personally, and also just to hear a further update of kind of what you guys had in mind going forward.
Well, I would just suggest that for y'all's discussion today, that the discussion focus around, I mean, this is not a new problem. It's been ongoing. It's been ongoing for many years, even from the 90s. But what is new and what has precipitated today is this request for an injunction. And then, if you just get an injunction, the sewage is still going to flow. But if they go through with this talk about capping the outflow valve, then clearly just what's going to happen is it's going to hold back up in all the houses there. And I think the real question you got to answer is, what if that happens? Y'all's position is going to be, are you going to step in and do something? And if so, what ideas you have? So I'll shut up and let y'all who have to make the hard decisions.
I think if we get a little information from James, he's very familiar with this from LAD. He actually provided this map to Andy and I several weeks ago, and this was generated as far back as 2002. So this has been a long-term problem with some potential remedies for it. They're all very expensive, and James actually went back and priced at current rates these potential segments. These are 3 segments in this map here. The black one is the one that there is no sewer. So I would think, just personally, if we're going to tackle this issue next year, it would have to be with bond money. We're paying a bond off, so we could turn around and reissue bonds and let it be strictly for sewer. Have enough in that to take care of Robin's issues at the plant. Money to do 1 or 2 or 3 of these projects, however far we want to go with. But we've all discussed that we don't want to do any of this until we can get it contingent on grant monies for different things that would potentially get us to the point where we could do all 3 phases for the same price as one, if we want to do that. So, and I don't think there's anything on this that says we would want to take the lagoon. Even if this project was done, it would go to the pump and take the liquid. Where it goes up the hill in the lagoon, I don't know that we would have any interest whatsoever in that. Once it goes into that pipe, into the city sewer, we don't need that lagoon, nor do we want it, because it's going to have to be closed, and it's going to be an expensive venture. Then it would also go up and eliminate the pump station at Earth Grange, where waste is going there and then having to be pumped up the hill to Cooper's and then down the railroad to the North White. So that would go basically from Earth Grange would be gravity feed to Dead Man's Curve pump station. That pump station could handle what it would need to do there, but our long-range goal is to eliminate all those pump stations on Airport Road. We know that's roughly an $18 million project. But if we could get sufficient funding in some of this 50% grant money, we could do that whole 3-pronged for $9 million and get some money for the plant and do that for at or less than what that bond is costing us a year now. So that's one of the decisions we're going to have to make in the next year is, are we going to do this? And if so, how much of it? And how do we want to structure it? And depending on what's developed in that part of town, there may be considerable amount of grant money. If you open this up to commercial industrial property next to the interstate, possibly. So we've got to have somebody that's an expert on getting grants and planning to assist us in that. And I think one of the first meetings we would have after we get a consultant hired is, how do we approach this? This is our infrastructure committee meeting. Then we can have other meetings on other things, but I think this one would be one of the first meetings we'd need to set up, because, you know, this is going to take several months. Next year this time we'll have made our last bond payment, and we could reissue bonds at that time. It just depends on how much for the sewer, because the sewer are standalone bonds, then we got general obligation, then you got education. Those bonds are still running until 2026, so. There's a lot of discussion to be had here, and I don't think ADM showed a lot of good faith today in requesting a meeting that they didn't even show up for. And I strictly went to that meeting the other day because I was around and knew about this map, showed them the map, and they're like, oh, okay, so there is a plan. It's not just being talked about. And they wanted to show the map and our plan to the bosses, then the bosses decided they didn't need to come. So here we are having a work session for ADM and they're not even here. So I think it's on us to just basically come up with a generalized pathway that we're going to go and not obligate ourselves to anything other than we're going to try to address this issue properly at the proper time, and it will be sooner than later. But I'm not going to be pressured by ADM into something that
They won't even show up.
They've let this run for years. And for the cost of buying a permit, they'd probably hush. But the permit's not going to be bought, so we can't give a franchise. So it's not incumbent on us to jump through a hoop right now at the last minute, because we've got a plan we're talking about doing finally, and now there's this sense of urgency when it's working properly. The pumps are working. Mr. Grove's paying the bill for the power to pump it up there. He's addressed some issues on stoppages, but there's a long-term fix up there that we got to look at too. Out of 190 households up there, I'll bet you 90% of them have never pumped their septic tank, and they're full, most of them. That's all got to be addressed. The lines that go here, there, and yon have got to be determined. There's some places that are probably seeping right now that people are aware of that go up there on a regular basis. You've got places that stay wet right now and have been for years. So those have all got to be located. We've got and just because it says I retain a 50-foot easement on your property to put a sewer line in, that doesn't tell us where that line went, or how deep it is, or how big it is. So all of those have got to be identified. It's going to be an expensive venture. So,
Robin?
Okay, it goes back before the 90s. I started dealing with this in 1983. I kept records on it. And not to mention the infiltration into the wet well of that pump station. Okay, that was one of the problems I seen when I kept records on it back then. Of course, I got sent to court because of a certain senator from another senator from our form. 4 cities with small diameter sewer systems, which this is what that is called. We all went to Montgomery. Nobody showed up like a court. Also went to court here in the county and had to testify what I thought was going on and everything. Of course, Rocky was Paul's attorney at that time.
No, I've never been Paul's attorney. Not yet.
Anyway, Paul said, well, we can find the sewer lines within 50 feet. And I said, I can throw a lawn dart up and hit it within 50 feet. Okay. Second, you've got a lagoon, it's outlived its life. 20 years, is that about as lifespan of a lagoon like that?
Well, mechanical was 20 years, a little bit longer.
Maybe. The walls have caved in on it before. You only have 1 pump running, not 2. He didn't buy 2 pumps. I sat there, your 4 lads, for a year and a half. Michael was with me. ADM let it run over for over a year and a half, out into Wills Creek. Didn't do a daggum thing. I had 5 EPA guys at my plant worried about saving power. I showed them pictures of this. They didn't care. Right, here's a paper in 2008 where Grote was fined $18,400. Right there it is, in 2008. ADM ain't gonna he should have been put in jail. If I had been me, I'd been put in jail, but he wasn't put in jail because he didn't have a license.
And they probably never collected on that.
They never collected on that. But they sat there and let that run open, like those 2 years there. I mean, straight sewage. And as far as the lines up there, that's a nightmare. You will never, I've heard so many stories. My brother lives up there, which I don't really care. And I feel sorry for the people that live up there. But it's not fair to the regular citizens paying regular sewer bills and for paying to pay for a method where a man made profit off big lots for big houses, for regular people like my mother is gone now to pay for a sewer rate for somebody up there. And the only answer is what Wade is talking about. That's the only fix-all and cure-all, and it's not a quick one, and it's expensive one. But as far as taking over all them sewer lines, I don't know what the answer to that one is, because nobody knows where they are. It's like he had a map one time, it looked like he drew it with a crayon, okay? And it just, there's no answers for that. Now, if you run that sewer down to 49th Street Pump Station, remember, y'all gonna build a new school there. You're gonna create an overloading problem right there, which is there, it's gonna hit behind Matt Cooper's. There's a double overload. So, your only route really is to go to Dead Man's Curve, or like Wade is talking about. It's very expensive. Very expensive, but it would solve that problem for then on. And then you've got Portobello up there. They sold all them lots, but they didn't think about the reservoir. Where's septic tank water go? Underground into aquifers, into the reservoir. Okay? That could possibly be put on Bullcrab up there.
James,
James, are you seeing any grant monies for projects like this?
There's some out there. If you can find some businesses or job located, that increases chances a lot. If you tie to recreation, there are some recreational grants. There's some of the SRL loan money, there's some principal forgiveness tied to that, which is essentially a grant.
When we talked about it, what, a year ago or so, 2 years ago when we went to Washington, we carried all this and presented, but it didn't do any good.
There's not a lot of discretionary or the old EPA grant that you got several years ago. All that kind of got that right
I can't see anybody just capping off sewer line.
They're not gonna do that. That's put them in,
I can't even believe.
they can't do that. I don't even think, now, he said they can't, I don't even think they enforce it.
I don't think there's a circuit judge around here that would allow that to happen. And I hate
Because
to speak for a
that
judge,
was-
but I just don't see them stopping up
That
sewer
was
line.
built without approval by ADM. Paul built that without approval by ADM, by himself, which he's not an environmental engineer. That was thrown together to sell property. That's all that was done for, and major profit, and grandson inherited. And he's gonna get rid of it just like I would too.
Part of the problem is there's actually 3 developers in that use this lagoon. Because
Well,
Mr. Grote doesn't even have control of what's north of him, which was another developer, and then up the ridge, which was another developer. So, it's gonna be a mess.
There's gonna be a lot of legal issues, like you said.
Yeah, but we got a real legal here.
Well,
I mean,
I appreciate you
There's
complimenting
gonna have
Tamara
to be a
that way.
lot of legal work done there.
Well,
No doubt about that.
the cleanest way to do it, and I don't know that it solves everybody's problems, but the cleanest way to do it from the city is to place a pump station there at the lagoon and connect to the outflow pipe that goes in the lagoon, turn the pump on and say everything on the other side of the pump's not ours.
Right.
Now, it may be that then over the years, you could have some smaller projects that you could do and lay regular sewer lines. You know, you can always do that with assessments. But getting gravity flow through those hills can be difficult. But you may have to have some smaller pump stations in there too. But if you took it over right there at the lagoon, then we shouldn't have any problems lagoon outward, legally or otherwise, I wouldn't think, with ADM. But that doesn't mean there's not going to be problems, because we have developing problems now up there. But then you could slowly go back through those areas and as we could afford it, add of conventional sewer lines and take some pump stations. And the sewer system now, and I assume everybody understands how it works up there, is sort of a strange system. It's not like down here in downtown Fort Payne where everything that goes through your house goes immediately into the sewer system. This is designed where everything goes into a septic tank without field lines. And it does whatever septic tanks do. And then you really are supposed to just get gray water out. But that's, as Wade said, nobody's cleaning those things out, so they're out.
Yeah, and we're getting pipes stopped up now.
Yeah.
You know, Tim's run into it. We had one that was stopped up and just blowing up in a guy's yard, which Grove finally did get somebody to come in and clean that out.
Well, and there's several places on the golf course where, and some of them close to ponds, there's several places on the golf course when you drive by, you know there's water coming up, you know what it is because you can smell it.
But from a resident standpoint, if a guy's sewage is backing up on him and he calls a plumber and he comes out and determines that it's not on his property, then there's where the problem starts.
Well, of course, one of the first things everybody up there ought to do, and this might be, one thing that would help everybody that already lives up there is if they'd get somebody out there, find where that tank is, and pump it out. Now, that will help tremendously, not only in the way the system will operate, but it'll help them not have problems. It'd be well worth their money to get all of those pumped out.
I hear some of the tanks are 10 feet deep. And yeah, you're right, that would be the best answer. That would solve a lot of problems right now for them. But I hear, if you can find, if you can find the tank.
Right, yeah.
I mean, but I hear some of them real deep from previous people that pumped them.
I have no idea where mine's at. I don't have a clue.
Well, we're just gonna cap your line.
I'll just go next door.
James, do you have your money figures on these projects, will you?
Yes, sir. About 18 million.
Yeah. That line, I believe the line from Dead Man's Curve up, it priced out at approximately how much?
6.8 million.
Nearly $7 million, just to go from Dead Man's Curve to Earth Drains. But that would eliminate the Earth Drains pump station. It would not eliminate the Dead Man's Curve, it would just put more load to it. That station was put in place and years ago, a line was run from Russell down to it that now has nothing but literally bathroom water.
Power bill on it's about between $35 and $50 a month.
Yeah, it literally does
It's
nothing.
sitting there doing
So we would be going to a pretty good pump station that's not being utilized.
Yeah.
The second phase would be the pink line going down through there, which would get us down to the end of the airport to another pump station that's probably one of the most used and heaviest used you got, right?
It takes the majority of all the flow north line.
Right. Everything comes from the north end of town down to the Y and out through the airport. What's on Airport Road goes to that pump station. I think if you're going to do this, you really need to look hard at doing all three of them, because it doesn't gain you a lot of ground. You're going to have to do the one north. That gets us to areas that have no sewer. We got to do that one first, but when we get into the planning phase of this, if we could get some of the grant monies like you're talking about, if we could get down to the point where we could do this on 50-50 or, principal forgiveness or however we work that out, the walking trails and stuff we talked about incorporating into this would hopefully qualify us for some grant money. If there's a school built there and it ties into it, that should have some benefit to help us get some grant money. I don't know what industrial stuff up there would expand, if any, but if we could get anywhere close to a 50-50 or even a 7-30, then we could do the whole thing for the price of what one section would cost.
It also would take off a load of Wills Creek on permitting for like my new permit. It would allocate more towards me and the chicken processing plant down in Collins. And what I'd like to see, I'd like to see Wills Creek cleaned up. I really would. That would be a great thing, because you don't realize how many people come in here and actually kayak there.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of use there.
I think that's a great futuristic problem. I mean, solution. I know it's expensive, but
Well, we're going to create a lot of work for Tim, whatever we do on anything we plan on, because we've got quite a bit of infrastructure stuff we're going to have to address. And when the time comes, it would either have to be Tim redoing that stuff from Terrapin Hills or a contractor if you bid it out. I would think that we would possibly be able to get maybe some grant money and do in-kind stuff and do the labor, our stuff, buy the materials, and do it for a lot less than a contractor would charge. But
Am I right that this would, I believe Jimmy Durham has said that there are some industries, if they came in and tried to locate up over in that valley, we couldn't accommodate them and couldn't put them there because we couldn't. And this clearly would open up some industrial development possibilities. Of course, usually you get your grants when you've got one that says this plant's going here if you give us some money. But I don't know if there's any grants out there. Jimmy might know whether there's any grants out there for opening up some areas that we couldn't put industry now.
it would be nice to be able to do this whole sewer project for less bond payment than we're making now on one that's paying off. And I think that's possible to do this whole three-prong project and get you some plant money for what we're paying now, or maybe a little less, if we can get enough money to come in and assist that process.
Yeah, I always think my car payment's going down when I trade too.
There's no way to do that without bond money, we all know that. There's
That's
no
right.
way you could fund any of this sewer stuff. When you're talking about millions and millions of dollars, that goes straight into the bond market there. And so we got several months to get the details worked out on how we're gonna do this. I think we all know this has gotta be done. That's gonna open up a whole section of Fort Payne that otherwise is gonna sit there just like it is.
The 49th Street, I mean, you know, we've got to have it down 49th Street before we get anything.
And the good thing about 49th Street is we still have the right of way from the creek all the way out to Whaley Head Road where the street used to run. 49th Street, you know, the new road is where it's at, but the old road is still down there next to where the power lines run. So we've got right of way already there we wouldn't have to acquire.
Now, you run your sewer line down toward the old road, wouldn't you, to do a gravity feed?
When that study was done, the new road wasn't there.
Right.
But that would be, if you're gonna do gravity, it would have to be down
It'd
there.
have to be down there. You have to pump it over the hill from Terrapin
Right.
and then drop it into it.
Yeah.
Well, and if you want to do it, if it turns out something has to be done before a year from now, when that bond issue turns out, there are ways to issue the bond now and either have low payments for the first couple of times, or sometimes if you don't take all the money, if you draw it as you use it, you can delay when your bond payments even start. So you may be able to issue a bond and then not have to make significant payments.
I'm not
before.
sure, but I think they probably would come illustrate that for you.
Well, I think they will.
Yeah. I know we got
Yeah.
one that
Be glad to.
we got one bond now that's like $100,000 a year for 4 or 5 years, and then it goes up $400,000 when another one pays off. So they can structure one any way you want to do it. It's how much you want to pay on principal. So I think it's doable. It's just, I think we want to do as much as we possibly can for as little as we can possibly spend.
Exactly. I think that's the key to it, is using all our resources and having a plan and pulling in people that know a lot more about this than we do, that have worked on projects like this, and combine them with recreation and that type of thing, and do as much as we can to benefit the city out of this project,
Right.
the city as a whole.
And I think that's what we've talked about from the beginning.
Right.
When we talked about the tax increase.
Right.
Was to, you know, we knew that the sewer project was gonna have to be looked at.
Right.
And we look at getting grant monies and see what we can get and make it stretch the furthest we can.
With regard to the immediate problem, I really haven't given a whole lot of thought to what I'm about to say. But it may be that y'all want to consider an intervention on behalf of the city, not into that lawsuit, so that we know exactly what's going on and when it's going on. I think that we have an interest in that. I think there's a public interest. I don't think anybody would object to our petition to intervene. That wouldn't put us in a position to demand anything, or wouldn't put us in a position where we could be forced to do anything. But what it would put us in a position to do is make sure that whatever judge had this case had all the information. I have concerns that all of our 3 judges have potential. I'm not saying they do have conflicts, but there's some things out there that could be issues, and that would be up to the judge as to whether it was an issue or not. But you know, there is some possibility that if you really start seriously talking about shutting that system down, that we could wind up with a judge who we don't know, from Andalusia, for example, or something.
I think that's important. I think that's a good point.
My personal opinion on this is we just go from here, just see what we can do on grant money, whatever thing, SRF loans or whatever is available, James. And let's get the information back to us, and we have to go from there.
Y'all want us to go ahead and
Let's get, is there any let's get a consensus here, John. You hadn't said anything. You live there. What do you?
I think you need to go after grant. I like.
Well, but we're dancing around the issue. Forget how it's going to be paid for. Is there consensus for us to take this on and work on this problem?
Take on the Terrapin Hills
I don't
system?
think
No.
there's any choice.
Well, he's talking about tying in at the lagoon though, right? Not the entire,
I'm talking about the city of Fort Payne taking over the Terrapin Hills sewer system.
Well,
But like Rocky and some of them alluded to, first part, there's two parts of the issue. First part is getting that lagoon offline. The lines to the residences, that's at a later time.
maybe a better way to state the question, Andy, if you'll allow me, is that, is there a consensus that we're ultimately going to have to address the problem? And that we're going to address the problem. Now, there's all sorts of different ways to address the problem. We may put a pump station there at the lagoon and never touch anything behind it. We may put a pump station there at the lagoon and slowly work our way back in there. We may decide at some point if we got a grant to go in and just do it all at once. I don't think that decision can be made today because you don't have the appropriate information. But what Andy needs, and I think what I need, is whether there's a consensus that ultimately this city council and this city are going to have to address this issue in some way, shape, or form. And the exact manner of that is not clear at this point, number one. And then I have a question is, do you want us to either monitor or try to get into that lawsuit so that we can know exactly what ADM's trying to?
I see no reason not to.
well, I have a question. Right now, who is getting the money from, I mean, they're paying for sewer, correct?
No.
Nobody's playing.
Nobody's paying,
Because they don't know who to pay.
right?
Let's back up a little, and this sort of touches on what Robin was getting to. When that system was originally developed, people who moved into those subdivisions had no charges. Those lots would not perk and could not, or only a few of them could perk, and they could not be sold because they couldn't be approved by the health department for housing. So the system was put together. It was put together, as Robin said, so the lots in at least 3 subdivisions, I'm not sure if there's not another one or two up there too, but in at least 3 subdivisions could be sold. Once those lots were sold, then the system became just a burden. And at that point, a franchise was requested from the city, and the city granted that franchise so that there could be sewer charges. And a lot of people that were the original purchasers objected to that. So we granted the franchise. When suits started being brought by ADM, and that franchise had to be renewed on a yearly basis, and it was renewed a couple of times, although it usually, there were some periods of operation without it being granted. It usually didn't get granted every year like it was supposed to, because it wasn't requested every year like it was supposed to. But ultimately, when ADM came out and said, you don't have a permit, my advice to the city was, I don't see how we can give a franchise to somebody who does not have a permit. And I felt like that ultimately could tie us into some potential claims on behalf of ADM until I trust them greatly. And so we did not grant them a franchise. So since that time, there haven't been any collections. Now, ADM has tried to come back and convince us to issue a franchise, and we've said to them, basically, when you issue a permit, we'll issue a franchise, but we're not going to issue a franchise if you say he's not permitted. So that'd be like issuing, that would just not be an appropriate thing to do. So the answer at this point is nobody's getting any money. And actually, there's a document signed that says any monies that are received by the owners has to go to satisfied judgment to Colorfast or something like that out of Albertville. So,
Tim?
Let me make a statement to your speech. My preference would be that we just pretty much abandon what they got up there. There's not much of that system that's salvageable anyway. if we were to go in, we don't have to compete with them because it's a non-approved system. So there's no jurisdictional problem, so we could start there and just build us a pump station by 49th Street, start running lines up the roads and not have to deal with any of their systems, because there's no competition, they never got approved. So we could start a new system and avoid all of that with the system that's there now. We don't have to worry about any of the lawsuits, because we'll own the right of way, we'll put a system in like there's not one there now. And just pick up customers.
You said run up there to the road.
Right, put everything on the right of way, and we don't need easements.
Right.
And we can do, there's a system you can do, James can talk about it more, but we can do a pressure system where you run pressure mains, force mains all the way around, and every house has their own pump that comes out of their tank, which that's what most of them are doing now anyway. It'll pump out of the tank into our line, and we can leave that the responsibility of the owner, having their pump in their tank, and all we're required to do is maintain the force main. And then after we get to 49th Street, then we pump it to our gravity. That one plan had a gravity on it, gravity all the way to the dead man's curve. But if we were to do that, that would take that whole system and all that conversation out.
Well, let me ask this question, just as looking at things as segmented in some way, shape, or form. If we get, although everybody says there's no way ADM's going to cap that outflow line, y'all have more confidence in common sense in Montgomery than I do. If we get to the point where something's got to be done, could that system then, could we build a pump station there at the lagoon and then do that afterwards?
Yeah, if it came to that, we could put a pump station and pump it down to dead man's curve.
Okay.
And that could be a pressure system the whole way and not do the gravity at this point. So, yeah, you can still do that.
And what's the time frame of what you're talking about? How long would that take?
Well, if we were to do strictly force mains and require the customer to do their own pump, you're looking at about, 1,000 foot a day, so I'm not sure about that.
Roughly what would it cost each homeowner to put a pump on their
They're
system?
usually those little E1 pumps, you probably dealt with those.
3,300 for a little small
Yeah, it's
package.
usually about 4,000 is normally what we.
Times 190, that's not gonna fly real good.
Plus they'd have to get the line from their house or from
The road.
To the road, yeah.
That's already there.
I might have worked on that project out on, at Geraldine, we did the same thing, or they did the same thing as similar to a rehab, where the city ran it to the tank, and then they tie in there, so it's just all they would be responsible for is just the pump. But I would recommend us not maintaining all those pumps, that's a nightmare.
Yeah, I agree with you there.
Even if we could use their existing tank, the way lets folks do that a lot, use their existing tank to drop a pump in, and then the city could still run the line all the way to the tank, and just by getting an easement from them. Afterwards, it would be their line, it would not be ours.
Okay, so the lines that are there from the tank down to the road for most houses wouldn't work in that system? We would have to run the line all the way up?
Yeah, it'd have to be a new line.
Okay.
Because theirs runs all over the place.
Do we have any idea on the cost of that?
I'm not sure, James could, he might be closer. If we did it ourselves, it would be a lot less, but you're looking at a lot of time.
If you bid it, each house is probably gonna run $4,000 or $5,000. You also got to tie it into the house, and you've got to lay the lines, and bid price might be anywhere from.
So $5,000 times 200 plus whatever the lines are, and then the owner has an expense of about 4,000 on top of that. Is that what we're
Well, that would
saying?
include the,
That would-
That would-
$4,000 would be the cost.
Okay. Well, I was looking at for the city's cost,
Okay.
so it would be less than that then.
Yeah, I mean, if you bid it out, you might average $10, $20 a foot if you have road crossings and everything. I don't know what the footage is.
How
You have
quickly
to go
could
all
you,
the way.
how quickly could you get us just a ballpark estimate on that?
About middle next week.
Do y'all want that?
How would you compare that to a conventional sewer system?
If you're starting from scratch, that's the cheapest way to install a system, because you don't have to lay it on grade, you don't have to have manholes, that kind of thing. But now, you know, if the existing system was salvageable at all and repairable, you know, then that would be the way to go. But
It
it's
still
such
doesn't
bad
work
shape,
until you
you can't
get-
get easement.
What I was kind of thinking was, you know, once we attack the lagoon issue, get it from there down, the eventual process of going into Terrapin Hills, I would think that you would be better served to take that gravity line on all the way up through Terrapin Hills on the creek. And then how you feed it from the other houses would be, you know, however you determine you need to do that. But I'm like you, I think you'd be better served just going there. If you had a new gravity main going up the creek, and yes, it's gonna have to go through the golf course on the edge of the fairway, but if you had that gravity line all the way up to 67th Street,
So that would
then
take
you
out
feed
the
it from
big
these
pump
subdivisions.
station. Each house could pump into the gravity.
Right.
So that would
Once
eliminate-
you're up here on the hill, you can basically gravity feed down to the gravity line and would eliminate the need for quite a few pumps and maintenance issues for us. But we would address that on a section by section deal, I would think. But my next question is, how many houses we got in Pine Hills? Anybody got any idea? They brought this up. We got some people down there talking about sewer. They've been on septic tanks since the 60s and 70s, just septic tanks.
That's all right.
I was gonna say, as soon as we do one,
You gonna do
they're
one,
all
you need to
going to
look at the
want.
other.
Well, Pine Hills has been one.
Right, I understand that.
Yeah.
You get, there's a lot better grant opportunity in Pine Hills.
That's what I'm thinking. If we could tie Pine Hills into this whole overall picture, that makes us not look like we're focusing on one section of town and give people the idea that we're just, you know, we're kind of turning a blind eye to somebody else. The mountain has no sewer and Pine Hills has no sewer, and there's a lot of houses per square acre down there.
Our intention on Pine Hills is after we close out, or got the rehab closed out, that would be our next project, to get Kim Irwin to start
Right.
the grant writing, try to get CDBG 80/20 match like we did on.
And I think it's getting more and more likely to qualify
It is,
for low
yeah.
mod stuff down there.
Wade, Bobo and Kim's been working together, and they said right now is the time to do it. It would be.
And I think now's the perfect time to put that discussion out there, that we're not just focusing up here.
Right.
We got an issue up here that's got to be addressed as far as a safety and a health issue, but that's an issue down there that's also going to have to be addressed. And if we tie those all together,
Yeah.
you know, yeah, you may be working all over town, but a lot of this stuff be bid out, and it may be one of those deals where we had to look at expanding your crew for a year or two, and then let attrition take that back down. There's a lot of options to do that, but I think we need to throw that out on the table, that we're not just focusing on this up here, but this is an issue that's got to be addressed right now. And if we can get this other one tied in, then maybe that helps one help the other.
I think the Pine Hills deal was pretty well, I think most everybody felt pretty good about getting it for next year. I think at the furthest out would be year after next, but from what indications I've got, next year would be a good point.
You'd be eligible to apply in May or so next year, whenever it is.
Right.
Right.
And it would stand a good chance of being funded because of the type of you got.
That would be great to have both of those going at the same
Yeah, it
time.
would.
I just want to throw it out there, because I know Red has been interested in that for quite some time, and I've got a lot of friends that live down there, and once that discussion got out there, it stimulated quite a bit of more discussion.
I've had a
I
few.
think that's a section of town that's been kind of,
I think we show our interest, and we're going citywide with our concerns and not just focusing on Terrapin Hills, but Terrapin Hills is an issue that we're going to have to address, because it is an issue that I don't see them capping that, but I fully understand why they're threatening, but don't think for 1 minute they wouldn't cap that and force you to do something. And especially if we get a judge we're not familiar with.
Well,
It'll be an environmental disaster.
one of my main concerns, and we talked about it quite a bit, is what happens on the other side of the pump, on the lines that are in the ground now. That's a problem that we've got right now with growth. The line stops up somewhere and it's not on the customer's property, then he goes to growth, and 9 times out of 10 gets nothing done. Who's gonna clear those blockages and dig up a piece of the golf course and what have you to fix that? we can't just leave that up to the individual people that live up there because that's not on their property. So how do we handle that?
Well, I think ultimately you're gonna have to handle it by redoing the whole system.
I understand, but I'm talking about in the meantime.
Well, in the meantime,
Do what you've been doing.
no,
What we've been
I
doing
can't
is
tell you
saying,
that.
no, we don't do it. Growth finally come in and done
Well,
something, but
we-
once this happens, Growth's gonna be out of the picture, I guarantee you.
Grove's out of the picture now.
They might as well.
ADM understands, he is not a part of the solution.
We can't get on private property.
No.
Can't go up there and do it.
That's what's got to be thought about too.
Well, and, you know, I just think what you're gonna have to do at this point is, folks are gonna have to take care of it, get permission wherever it is. I don't think anybody on the golf course is gonna deny permission for somebody to go up there and do that, but, I don't, that's gonna be a problem. But you can only solve one problem at a time.
And the immediate problem is, ADM is gonna pursue the injunction against Grove. They told me that flat out yesterday. Unless we can come back to them with something that is satisfactory in their mind, other than, let's just say, well, this is something we're thinking about, and we may or may not do it. So that's the decision we've got to make right now. Or is there any interest in, as Rocky said, tackling that problem? Whatever, we can talk about the different variations of the solution, but the thing we've got to know real quick is there a willingness on our behalf to do anything with it?
And I think that needs to be expressed, because if you just say, and we have to this point, we have taken the position of, we didn't build it, it's not our fault, it's not working right, and you guys are supposed to make sure it's not working right, and it's not our problem. And you got two choices: either you can say, yes, we're gonna figure out a solution to it, or it's not our problem, and then let ADM do whatever ADM does. But if you're gonna stop ADM from pursuing this thing, you're gonna have to say, we're gonna fix the problem. And then you gotta answer the question about, what do we do about the immediate problem, the lagoon? Then you gotta answer the question about, what do you do to the mines? It's sort of like eating an elephant, you know, the old joke about how do you eat an elephant, one bite at a time. Now, this is at least an elephant, it may be bigger than that, but.
Well, what does ADM actually want? Do they want us, I mean, right now, if tying into the lagoon with that plan,
They don't have a plan.
if that's not going to satisfy them, then we're going to have to do
ADM
something.
is not, they're not asking, all they're requesting now is I guess a commitment from y'all that you are going to tackle that problem. How it is tackled is,
They don't care.
that's down the road.
There's no,
I don't think we have a choice but to address the problem.
That's what we need to hear. is that-
Right.
well, the deal is that, let's just be blunt, we can be blunt in the paper. They've been trying to force us into a position where we had to do something. They're not gonna do anything. And
And Grove's not gonna do it.
Grove's not gonna do anything, and the fact of the matter is, ADM's apparently decided and has the time to push this thing, and they're gonna push it and try to get an injunction. And they're trying to basically do what they've been trying to force us to do the last 10 years, and that's let it become our problem.
We were talking the other day, in some of the other jobs that you worked before coming to the city, you were involved in some jobs that ADM actually put some money in, did you not?
Normally what happens is they try to force the system on the nearest utility at all costs. And they'll say, we're not gonna pay anything. Well, after you refuse enough, they'll start saying, well, if we rebuild this pump station, will y'all take it then? Eventually, they'll write a big enough check that it would justify taking it. But you gotta wait till that point till they start, and they will. They say they don't do that, but they do.
Well, I think therefore that it's not time for us to do anything yet.
Well,
We wait,
we did a system.
balls in their court here
We
back.
did a small system in South Alabama, and they said, we're not doing anything then. And eventually, they said, well, what if we rebuild this portion of it? And it was not enough, and they went to the next offer, and the city accepted it.
Seems to me they would come up with some money.
Yeah, there's.
Yeah, they're the ones that have allowed it to get to this point.
That's right.
This set up there and did that for 2 years, and they didn't, I called them, and they didn't give them, you know what? And I spoke to the press in Huntsville, and they reported it. And Nothing was done. Nothing was done. Then he went and bought one pump, and that's all's up there right now. If that one pump goes out, we're back where we were 2 summers ago.
And am I correct in saying that that pump is running 24 hours a day?
Constantly.
It does not have controls or
They got-
anything?
The controls are so out of date. You gotta remember, these controls come back from when they originally put it in.
Yeah.
Another thing, you're talking about these stoppages on these lines, they use 30, number 30 pipe, not 35, schedule 35 or 30.
33.
It is so
Yeah.
thin.
Yeah, it's one notch above thin
Matter of fact,
wall.
my brother used to live up there, he called me out there and he said, what is this right here? There's a 8-foot long strip of white going out there, and I said, I looked at it and I said, that's a sewer line. And it was half above the ground. Okay, sun's deteriorated this.
Well,
You
even
put a
use
jetter in there, it'll go out the side.
That pipe, you can squeeze with your hand, you can't jet it.
Yeah, you can't get it.
Thing about ADM was like, they give him so much time and he hadn't paid them any money. If we take
If
it
it
over,
been
they're not
me.
gonna give us that much time.
No, they're gonna
Robin
find
been
us
dead.
right off the bat.
Right off the bat.
That system not being put in under ADM inherited that problem, I understand that, but it is ADM's problem, it is not
Yes.
the city's problem.
Yes.
It is 100% their problem, and they're trying to get a solution with the city.
Well, that's the reason I would be hesitant about making a commitment.
Yeah.
And if you take it over right now, I'll guarantee you, let's get this thing up to snuff.
Now,
You
somewhere,
watch and see.
now, there's no doubt in my mind that somewhere down the road, this city, the city council is gonna have to tackle this issue. But I don't think right now is the time to make a commitment till we see if we can get something out of ADM or somebody to help us along the way. And I think we right now, the ball is back.
Yeah, I think that's the first thing we ought to ask them, how much y'all gonna be willing to chip in on this?
I agree.
And
Got the problem.
It's their problem, not
Yeah.
ours.
It's their problem, yeah.
We're sitting over here, you know.
Well, it's like I said to start with, they just looking for a good opportunity to find the city.
Yeah, and they'll probably start next week if you take it there.
If we agree to take it, then that's exactly when it
Well,
was.
no, ADM and EPA, they work together. We got funding on Leesburg from both of them. ADM put in half and EPA put in half, so they may help us or may try to help get some EPA funding to get it rebuilt. And they may be, interested in going along with replacing the whole system.
Well, I was always told you had to be careful with any outfit that uses initials.
That's right.
What kind of flow? Anybody got an idea of what kind of flow comes out of that?
That's what I asked in a minute ago.
With 200 homes, you would think there would be around 30,000 gallons a day, but that doesn't include groundwater. But if ADM has a consent order with somebody, if they have violations, and they enter the consent order with them, they'll put, in those consent orders, they'll put a timeline, and they can be negotiated for a year or 2 or 3 years to get in compliance. So I would think if the city ever gets to the point where you decide to take this over, that there could be some kind of negotiated compliance schedule so that you wouldn't get those fines the next week, anything like that.
Now, I would say one thing, ADM's got a lot of different departments. And the department we've been working with the old hospital, has been as very cooperative as anybody possibly could be. And they coordinating with EPA and HUD and several different ones. But that's not the division that handles this.
Since you brought that up, the old hospital, I got a question, I guess, for Rocky on this. Rocky, that hospital was built, what, in the 50s?
Yes,
And it was a county hospital at the time it was built.
that is
And
correct.
best that I can recall, there was a hospital tax added on to fund the building
That's-
of that hospital.
That is correct. And
Was
after that hospital was sold and the new hospital was built, and I don't hold me to this because I'm not 100% sure, but I think that tax is still collected by the DeKalb County Hospital Association.
I think you're exactly right. Well, was there anything in the law that was written when the tax was passed, that if that building ever ceased to operate as a hospital, it reverted back to the county?
No, well,
Have you ever researched that?
no, never looked at that, but now, when they built the new building, it was still a county hospital.
You talking about the new hospital?
Yes, when
Yes,
they
but
built
I'm
it.
talking
I
about.
know, but the County Hospital Association owned it, and they sold it to the people who ran the fountains. So there's no reversion back, because the county sold it. The county owned it through the Hospital Association. When DeKalb, or DeKalb Regional, or whatever it's called now, was built and leased by the Baptist, then they sold that hospital to some group that ran the fountains in it for several years. And then I think it was sold again, and then it was mortgaged to a bank in Boston. And then when they quit using it, they quit paying for it. The bank in Boston foreclosed on it, but never recorded their foreclosure deed. And you stop me if I get off track.
New York.
New York, okay, not Boston. It's the same thing, Yankees.
Yeah.
But anyway, and they never recorded the deed, so the title is still in this corporation. Taxes haven't been paid for the last 6 or 7 years, and the bank won't record their mortgage deed, foreclosure deed, because they don't want to pay the back taxes. But they'll be glad to give it to us if we'll pay the back taxes.
I understand, but,
Tear it down and clean up all the
As we may
asbestos.
get some concessions on.
Would you like to buy it, Nick? You want to buy the old hospital at the tax sale?
well, I'd like
To go with your sewer system?
Let me see if I could sum up this. I don't know whether I can or not. We go back to ADM. We tell them that we've got a long-range plan that we're working on. The time frame is going to be variable, and it will be dependent a lot on how much they help us with it, how much money they're willing to put into the project, and what kind of time frame they're going to give us to operate after the project is completed without being down our neck every other day. And just go from there. Anything else that we ought to talk to them about? I mean, we're not making a commitment. We're just saying we're looking at it long-term basis. We want you to make a commitment.
I think they got to.
Yeah, I think so. At this point, the ball's in their court, like I said, it's up to them.
At that point, they're going to pursue their.
At that point, they're going to pursue their injunction.
The next thing that happens is supposedly that pump goes out again, what have you. We'll be back into running it in the creek. EPA came over, and they didn't see fit to do anything.
They didn't really care about it.
It wasn't big enough, we didn't kill enough fish, I guess.
Boot don't kill fish.
we can what if this thing today? My motion to adjourn.
Good job.
We need to have a work session for our appropriations next week, so y'all pick a day.
Well, that meeting next week, the regular meeting on Tuesday, or not?
Yeah. You think an hour prior to that would be sufficient time to go over the appropriation? Good for that?
Yeah.
We don't have anything else planned?
No. Work session at 11 o'clock.
Okay. All right. I guess we can consider ourselves adjourned from this work session.
Thank you, Nick, we appreciate it.
Thank y'all.
See you.
How are you?
Lord, Lordy.